Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Abitchonistim. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security policies to guide the state of Israel. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning in to this briefing. It's a great privilege to be joined today by Danny Seaman, who is no stranger to these briefings, to provide an update and analysis on the war. Danny, good to see you.
Thanks for having me again.
So the first thing I want to do is there's definitely been an uptick in activity in this war today. So before we jump into any deeper analysis, if you can just share with us what is new right now, what is happening in this war?
Well, yesterday, there was, for the first time in several weeks, missiles fired in the direction of Ashkelon and Ashdod from central Gaza, which is mostly under Israeli control now. But what people don't know is that several locations, refugee camps, Israel did not move into. And those areas where Hamas moved into, and they were using that to fire missiles in the direction, these positions were taken out. But what we see happening in the past week is Israel going back. Israel sort of reduced the number, I think this was given in the briefings here, reduced its forces in Gaza, concentrating basically on two locations. One, near Rafah, the Rafah area, and just north of there, and the Shifa hospital, which Israel had taken over. And there's a lot to be said about this, and that is not revealed about it. But I can basically say, if you put two and two together, this was a nice mousetrap that was set by Israel. The full information is not released yet. All we know is this: the Hamas felt comfortable enough to go back to the Shifa hospital and felt that they were secure there. And a lot of their leaders came back in, and suddenly they had nowhere to escape. They thought they had pulled one over on us. And I'm being very, very cautious with what I'm saying here. But I think that what we see here is very important. There's a lot of talk in the media, here in Israel, certainly abroad, on what is going on in the battlefield. I'm happy to see with the Shifa hospital that a lot of the very important things are not reaching the media, only after Israel does what it needs to do. But you can see from this two things happening here. Hamas is still very much alive, if you want to call it that. And they'll go back to any place that we withdraw from, or they feel that we're not present in. And so Israel has concentrated that. We took out a lot of the leaders. We got a tremendous amount of intelligence information from them. And we're continuing with the effort there. And we're increasing the numbers now in Gaza. The other thing was that Israel withdrew and reduced the number of troops, hoping that the negotiations that were going on, being led by the United States in Egypt and in Qatar, for the release of the hostages, they were giving it a very serious opportunity to go through. Unfortunately, Hamas rejected, though Israel accepted what was, from our position, very difficult terms. Israel accepted these terms. These were rejected last night by Hamas immediately after the vote at the United Nations. And you see that they feel right now, and this goes on with a lot of things today. Colombia, for example, threatened Israel that it will cut off its relationship with Israel if we do not accept the ceasefire. By the way, the UN resolution is non-binding. Article 6 is not applied in this article. That's why the United States claims that they abstained. But still, it sent a message to Hamas that they're under no pressure. They believe that Israel will be forced to cease. And if we can see from the Shifa hospital that Hamas are not going to lay down their weapons. Israel has no alternative but to follow through on this. It's unfortunate what the United States said, and I'm being very diplomatic with what I'm saying right now, because we're still we're focused on winning this war. It'll be easier for us with the assistance of our allies and with the United States. But as the Prime Minister said, and the people of Israel, the Prime Minister is responding to the people of Israel. We have to annihilate Hamas. There is no end to this without taking out Hamas, because they have made it very clear, and they're proving it now, that as long as they can still breathe, they will continue to attack Israel. We are not going to have another October 7th. And that has to be very clear. So anybody trying to, and there's pressure being applied to Israel right now, the reasons being it's inconvenient for the West. And I could have started off our briefing today with reading the book of Kohelet. I've always had in English, Ecclesiastes. Very simple. There's nothing new under the sun. You all know that, regardless if I quote the Bible passage or not. And that is not only in regards to Israel, but let's remember the appeasing of Germany prior to World War II, the fact that the Western world completely discarded Czechoslovakia at the time. We're not in the position of Czechoslovakia. We are quite capable of defending ourselves. We understand what the consequences of not taking on this evil. And look at all we have to see is what's going on. The irony of what happened in Russia this week, the fact that the ISIS there attacked them of all countries. Every Western country, every country has to realize that none of them are safe. We're just the forefront of what is happening. The signs and portents are all there. And this is not some biblical thing that I'm quoting and not some religious fervor. We see it all. History is repeating itself right now. And the West, unfortunately, is repeating the mistakes it made before World War II. Every action they took at that time did not delay the war. It just brought it upon us. So the same thing is happening here. Yesterday was an outrageous mistake on the part of the Western world and on part of the United States. It did nothing to advance peace. It did nothing to end the war. And more importantly, it did nothing to release the Israeli prisoners. And perhaps our mistake is that we have not made the focus of everything our hostages being held there by Hamas. We should have refused to do anything, but we were trying to work together with our supposed allies, and this has worked against us and against the freeing of the hostages.
So, Danny, let me ask you a question. Israel looks to the U.S. for both aid and also its UN Security Council veto vote. Now that that vote is off the table, do you think Israel has more of a freedom of operation here in Israel because there's no longer that to lose?
I don't think we did that out of a concern that we would lose it. I think it actually, there was, look, the United States has always done what is in its own best interest, and that any country does. For some reason, we have this ridiculous attitude that we believe that, oh, you know, if we're all together and we're all hugging each other and singing Kumbaya, my Lord, this will, in some way, people will understand how wonderful we are. At least some people think it that way. We have to do what's in our best interest. Every country does that. And no country would have tolerated what we're going through. None country would put itself in the situation that Israel is going through. So I think in a way it makes it easier for the government here, because you have this pressure of elements in the Israeli media, unfortunately, and in the Israeli left wing that are waving their concern or the concerns Israeli may have about losing American support. They're waving and say, oh, you know, if the government does this or does that. So now we've lost that in the sense that we're not worried about that anymore. Now, I can tell our viewers here that the public, the general public in Israel support the government, and two things, because what is all behind this is this attempt to impose a Palestinian state on the state of Israel here in the Middle East, which will be a tremendous mistake. No, a vast majority of Israelis and any Israeli in their right mind understand that that is completely off the table. There is nothing that can allow us to allow the creation of a Palestinian state that would be no more than a ticking time bomb to the existence of the state of Israel following what we saw on October 7th. Many of us knew this beforehand, but if we needed the charade to end, it ended on October 7th. So that's what they're going for. We can't allow that to happen. So in that sense, it releases us from those restraints. And I think the other thing is that the world knows, and it's been true also with Israel, when you fight for your defense, when you're fighting for yourself, when you're victorious, the world falls into place. So we shouldn't be too concerned of what they're saying right now. And I think it's one of these very clear moments in history of right versus wrong and good versus evil. And we're on the side of right. regardless of what the Western media may be telling some people here. And I think we'll be addressing one of those issues in a moment. But to those who are on the side of Israel should know very clearly that there's no two ways about this. And even if people don't see it, I can put it simple as an Israeli myself who have family in the south of Israel and know people who were murdered on that day and know a young lady who's being held hostage. We're not going to fall for this. And we'll do it alone if we need to. Make there be no doubt about it. The Israeli public, the Israeli people, the Israeli government, we will continue until we rid ourselves of this threat.
Thank you, Danny. I want to remind all of our viewers that in addition to our newsletter, our daily newsletter that goes out via email that hopefully everyone is subscribed to, we now have a WhatsApp community where everyone can join. And if you're on our WhatsApp community, not only do you get these briefings, but we take little clips of these briefings, which you can then view the highlights and you can send out to your family and friends. And through that WhatsApp community, it's been a very effective way of us communicating with our listeners. And I can tell you that yesterday's briefing, Danny, disturbed many people. And I want you to speak about it if you can. That yesterday, General Avivi shared his interaction with the State Department and the accusation they made directly to him against the IDF, against Israel, and what his response was. And this bothered so many of our viewers, which it should. Danny, I'd love it if you, and I know you know that story, Dan, I'd love it if you can respond. What are your thoughts on the interaction? And if you can also provide some broader context to potentially where the US State Department potentially got that false information from.
That's very discerning. I was listening into it yesterday, and I admit I was disturbed myself, but also because the source of this was Al Jazeera. And Al Jazeera are the voice for jihadist Islam, for the Muslim Brotherhood that are run by Qatar. The Americans here have a much greater problem. They don't realize that the American government is hand in hand, arm in arm with Qatar. Qatar is not only investing in American universities and affecting the minds in the cognitive warfare, but they're also providing the United States with a wonderful base in Qatar. But they are the biggest force behind the advancement of jihad. And the American administration, all administrations, tend to ignore this element. And it's not going to turn out well eventually. Now, they also fund Al Jazeera. And Al Jazeera are terrorist supporters. And they are the wing of the jihad to influence the minds. And the fact that the State Department are using them as a source of information and not verifying this information beforehand, because it's not only the fact that they lied there and lied about other things. There has never, in the history of the warfare in the Middle East between Israel and the Arabs, never been a documented case of Israelis performing rape against Arab women. There has never been a single incident. And this, by the way, was investigated by a professor at Hebrew University, a woman who did her doctorate at the Hebrew University. And she was going to try to expose these atrocities by Israel. This was done about 20 years ago, I believe. And she couldn't find an incident. So what did she say? Oh, this is indicative of the racism of the Israeli soldiers who dehumanize the Arab women and don't rape them. You know, damned if we do, damned if we don't. That's how amazing this thing is. But it's despicable because not only has not been a case of it, the fact that Al Jazeera would be a source of credible information from members of the State Department is atrocious. So Al Jazeera themselves felt that there was something wrong with this, and the head of Al Jazeera looked into it. The woman who provided the information was an Arab from Gaza who admitted eventually that this was a lie. And she said this because, first off, the Israelis were lying, and she wanted to counter the lies of the Israelis. And I remind you here, I know I don't have to with the viewers of this, but it's necessary because the attempt to portray or project that what was the atrocities done to Israelis on this 7th of October were lies and made up by Israel, including the murder of children, the rape of children, the rape of women, the rape of men. They're accusing Israel of lying about this. And Anybody knows that these were documented by Hamas themselves. So she said she wanted to prove this and provoke people and get people worked up by spreading this accusation against Israel. And she eventually turned around, and Al Jazeera denied that. By the way, they added to it, but this doesn't mean that Israel isn't performing other atrocities. So it was sort of a half recant. So it's a lie that is going to be perpetuated by anybody who's opposed to Israel. If they can come around today and say Israeli women weren't raped and Israeli babies were not burned after these things were not only documented by the footage of Hamas, but also not only Israeli medics, but also international medics who looked into this and pathologists and saw the evidence of these things. So it's amazing. So this is certainly something they'll be perpetuating. And again, the fact that, you know, these lies against Jews, Israel today is the embodiment of the historic Jew, where every lie, everything can be said against us and is immediately accepted. But the fact that the State Department does this, that's unbelievable.
Danny, Al Jazeera, are they endorsed, so to speak, by the Israel press office? Do they have press credentials?
I want to stop you here because something popped up on the screen here. One of the questions. I'm fuming right now. Somebody denying the fact that babies were beheaded. I saw the images myself. I saw it myself, and I spoke to the doctors and the pathologists. So don't come and take me something. I don't care who the person is. Don't you dare deny that, because babies were put in the ovens in their homes, and babies had their heads decapitated. These are facts. And I don't care where you're getting the information from. Sorry, just so outrageous that somebody can come on here and throw that out, even if only you and I see the question or see the comment itself.
Danny, I agree with you, by the way. And for everyone out there who asks us, why can't they make comments publicly on our briefings?
Okay, it's quite clear right now that we have some kind of...
Right, I just want to make that clear to everyone, so...
So the idiot who is doing this, just so you know, only we see it, the people on here, the rest of the people don't see it. So instead of, you know, I don't even have to get angry because I got angry because I respected that person, but it's quite clear to me that that person is an imbecile that is not supposed to be on here. Go troll somebody else.
Danny, agreed. And I think we may have to remove people from these briefings.
Yeah, his name is on there, so we can get them and remove them.
Continue with that. Okay, so let's go back to this question about Al Jazeera and their press credentials here in Israel. How does that work?
It works that any bona fide media organization receives credentials from the government of Israel. By bona fide, we mean that it's a recognized media organization that it doesn't even have to uphold standards. We don't check the standards. We just see the country, etc. We had an incident back 20 years ago, over 20 years ago, with what was called the Al-Dura case, which France too, and I was sued as the director of the government press office at the time to remove their press credentials because they were the ones who spread the lie of the Al-Dura case. Supposedly Israel at the time shot and killed a young boy, and the incident which began the violence at that time, the Second Intifada, the Oslo War. I was sued to remove credentials. And I said, look, France is a democratic country. It upholds principles of journalism and freedom of speech. We cannot deny them because we don't evaluate if France 2, for example, which is an official state-run media organization in France, we don't determine whether or not they uphold the principles of journalism. We just see if the person is employed by them, it's their responsibility. If this person fails, and their correspondent at the time failed miserably, it's their responsibility. If not, they're doing a bad deed to their own viewers. So the court then upheld my position on this. But I did this deliberately because I knew the court would never back me up on this. So I needed to just present France 2 to show how terrible they were in their professional standards. Al Jazeera is a different thing because they don't come from a democratic country. They come from Qatar, and Qatar is in line with the Muslim Brotherhood. The state of Israel not only should refuse them credentials, They should not allow them to work in Israel, because before that, they were working with some kind of Arab production company from Ramallah. And I told them if they want credentials, they have to uphold the standards of every international organization here, which to their credit they did. But then they were taken over by the Muslim Brotherhood, and they started shifting and became a mouthpiece for the jihadists. So today, so they could just, they can stop giving them credentials, and this is what the government is aiming for. But I'm warning them that what will happen is that they'll just work under another, they can call themselves Bibi Productions or Netanyahu Productions and still provide Al Jazeera with content. We should not allow them to work under any, and if any AP or Reuters or the satellite company in the El Valley provide them with services, they will be capable of suing them as well for assisting the enemy. I don't know if they're going to go that far, but just taking away the credentials from Al Jazeera will be more of it won't be something of substance, and that's what I'm worried about. But they are thinking of it right now, and I think that the entire Western world should not continue cooperating with Al Jazeera.
So practically then, if they were just to rename themselves and get press credentials, what would the press office do? Do they do background checks on every reporter? Is that even
Yeah, they do. They do. That's one of the reasons we refused to give Gazans press credentials at the time. I don't know about today, but in my time, I refused to give it to them because it was clear that they were members. And it's the whole thing. When Hamas controls an area, you can't be an independent providing materials to AP or Reuters, et cetera, who, by the way, were both sued by families whose sons and daughters were murdered at the music festival for employing these people who we saw on the footage of October 7th were working in cooperation with Hamas. But we knew this from before, because you can't be an independent there. You have to be a member and get the stamp of approval of Hamas and be a Hamas member. So that's the situation in Gaza, at least. In Judea and Samaria, it's a bit more flexible because you also have the Palestinian Authority that Israel recognizes, but Hamas we don't recognize. So they could do that, and then you'll have people just working for Al Jazeera and providing them with content, and we have to make sure that does not happen as well. Make it very clear that it's not only being employed by them, because we are a democracy. You don't need the press credential in order to roam around freely in Israel. I just remember from back at the time when you had the incident with Ariel Sharon, when he was hospitalized before he was incapacitated and couldn't continue working as prime minister, you had somebody working for Iranian television outside the hospital reporting. They didn't have press credentials, but it's a democratic country. Anybody can do that. And today it's even easier. All you need to do is take your phone and you can stand there and report and do a TikTok, and you can get coverage.
Thank you, Danny. And I just want to give a shout out to everyone who is putting positive messages in our chat, overwhelming the negative messages. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing that. Danny, one final question, because we're almost out of time. You've been involved with the IDF and the government for many, many years now. You've worked closely with the Prime Minister. In terms of what has just happened with the UN, how do you think that is affecting the higher up decision making? Is it making them more cautious or more potentially aggressive in terms of their next activity in this war?
I know Prime Minister Netanyahu almost 40 years, know him enough, and he takes a lot of heat from a lot of Israelis. Even people who they say, oh, why are so many people that are close to him? They don't get his whole focus is the state of Israel. If there's anybody with a historical understanding, not only of himself, but also of what is happening to Israel, it's Netanyahu. And that's all he cares about, at the expense of anything, by the way, even friendships, he's focused. People say, oh, he's there to keep himself in office. Maybe, but it's because he believes that he's the right person for the state of Israel. And I happen personally to agree with that. I think he is the proper person for this. So his focus is on what needs to be done to help the state of Israel, because we have to repeat this. I know it's been said by several of the people who presented here in the past. Israel, and let there be no doubt about this, we are at an existential moment. It may not happen immediately. It's obvious that the Hamas and Hezbollah, by the way, are still fighting with us in the north. We didn't mention that before. They cannot annihilate the state of Israel, but they can create the circumstances. If we do not send a clear message following October 7th, because at the moment, they do not see this. The Arabs do not see this as a defeat. They see it as a tremendous moment in Islam. And even if it costs them whatever number it costs, it is a forebearer of what they need to do in the future. We have to completely discourage them from that. And I believe that the Prime Minister understands this. So if that means if we have the rest of the world on board with us, understanding that it's not only an Israeli issue, for us, it's existential. But for the West, it's also meaning that there will be implications for the West as well. Well, either they believe that or not. We have no choice. As the Israeli public see it here and the Prime Minister, it's us or them. We know whose side we're on. You can choose to be with us or not. We're going to do, and I know the Prime Minister is going to do what is necessary that Israel comes out of this not only victorious, but sending a clear message that you do not screw around with the people of Israel and the Jewish people in the land of Israel.
Danny Seaman, thank you so much for joining this briefing. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. I know yesterday's briefing, a lot of people ended off a little downtrodden and depressed, and I think you have inspired and energized us. So thank you so much.
If I may just end with this. My son, those of you listen, my son was finally released, and I had very long conversations with him. His buddies came to hang out here a few days ago, and I discussed with them as well. We have a wonderful generation. You all still celebrate your greatest generation from World War II. We have our greatest generation at the moment. There be no doubt about it. These kids, young men and women, are absolutely dedicated and understand what is at stake. And they're proud to stand up and, if necessary, put down their lives for the state of Israel. We are so fortunate. I don't know, there are no words to describe this, that we have the determination. You can put our trust in these kids, and anybody who badmouths them. You know, I spoke to them. There's no hate. There's a love of country and understanding what is at stake here. And you should trust in that and understand that. And that's our kids, our young men and women.
Thank you so much, Danny, for that. Amazing. We're going to have to pull out that sound bite and send just that alone out. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. We will be back with you tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Just a note that next week we're returning to 10 a.m. Eastern time as we change the clocks. But as of now, tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.